Namaste. We will start with our Shanti mantra. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryan Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhe Tamastu Ma Vitvishavadhe Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat. So today is a special session. We have a guest lecture of a person who has have been very important for me in the earlier days of my exploration. So, Mr. Parameshwaran, I introduced to you Mr. Parameshwaran. Uh, so, he is a multifaceted person. He has explored, he is into astrology, numerology, physiognomy, Siddha medicine, Siddha yoga, and also he's a student of philosophy. So, he was doing his PhD sometime back in philosophy. He finished his MA in philosophy, and he's also a registered lawyer. So, and currently he's an educationist. So he has been a principal of a couple of IB international school institutions, and he was in charge of a project for commencing that Wales group of institutions for them to. He was a consultant for them in UK, and recently he came back. So, in my initial days of exploration, we had a small group of friends who used to go into deeper aspects of reality and explore the deeper aspects of life, the patterns in the universe, and how our personal sadhana and all that. And Mr. Parameshwaran was a very important part of that. So, he gave us the title Vienna Circle. I don't know. It's very interesting to have such a friendship circle of friends, and it has been very useful. And he had given me a lot of yogic insights because he has personally served two great yogis. One, Arindar Kiniyanar. He was a great yogi who lived until 126 years, and he has personally served him and learned from him, a Siddha yogi. And also, he had served, I think, a central government awardee, Siddha Vaidya, Vadapayani Siddhar. No? Yeah, so he has served under him, and he has also practiced one very unique and very rare kind of pranayama technique called Chandra Yoga, which comes in Tirumandiram. They call it Chandra Kalai. So he has practiced that, and he introduced me to that. And he has been a practitioner of Vasi Yogam, what is popularly called as Kriya Yoga. And he has explored a lot of things, physiognomy, astrology, Vedic astrology, Western astrology, homeopathy, Siddha medicine. So he's a very multifaceted person. And I thought he should be with us in this satsanga and probably explore more possibilities of more sessions with him. So today he is here with us as a student of classical philosophy, as a postgraduate and a doctorate researcher of classical philosophy. He is here to introduce us to the Western philosophy and the comparison and contrast between our philosophical systems and classical Greek Western philosophy, with a special emphasis on that. And he give us a brief picture and see how. Let us see how he is going to take us through the journey. So we welcome Mr. Parameshwaran, and I hand over the session to you. So please unmute him and mute me so that I don't talk unnecessarily.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Yogeshvar Karthik, for a wonderful introduction. So nice of you. I believe I'm audible. I'm quite audible, right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Before I start, I would like to quote the Rigveda mantra. Ekam sat vibra bhuta vatanti. Okay. Reality is one, and intellectuals interpret it in their own way. So in today's session, we would like to explore different perspectives about how different schools of thoughts have approached this concept of truth. So when Karthik first told me, I was little taken aback, right, to talk about truth in 1 hour session or a 40-minute session, because in philosophy we have something called hard questions. Right. So what is truth? What is reality? All these are hard questions, which has actually troubled and lingered over the years, let's say for at least 5,000 long years, I should say. So we have taken a very brave venture today. So let's see how we can cover most of it. Okay. So I assume that a majority of the participants are new to philosophy, and I take the liberty of exploring little bit about the basic expressions, technical expressions that is being used in philosophy. Okay, so when we talk about truth, in most of the schools, starting from prehistoric period, I mean pre-Greek period, so we can say there are two major divisions. So one school of thought which believes that there is something called absolute truth with T capital, and there is another school of thought which believes that there is something called relative truth. So whenever we talk about truth, right, we should always talk with a small t, right, which is relative to the context, right, in terms of time, in terms of space. Okay, so this is one major distinction that happens. So whenever we talk about different schools of thought, this should also be kept behind our head. So that is one major distinction when we talk about truth. And there are expressions like validity. So we need to know the difference between truth and validity. Okay, so when we talk about validity, we talk only in the perspective or only within the context of logic. So we are talking only about logical validity. It might be true, it might be false. So we don't get into that. I'll give you a lot of examples while we proceed. Then we have something called real versus unreal. So when we talk about something which is real, what is meant there is that which doesn't have an origin in time and end in time, which doesn't change the passage of time. So this is the definition which is given to the expression real. But unfortunately, many schools use these expressions interchangeably, right? On many occasions, many schools, when they talk about truth, they also interchangeably use it with the expression reality or real. Okay, so this is something which you'll have to keep in mind, because obviously I believe you will be exploring this particular topic in future. So I want you to keep these things in mind. Then we have something called theories of truth. Okay, so though we have almost 6 or 7 theories of truth, today we will focus on three major theories of truth. And along with that, I will also touch upon a little bit on constructivistic theory of truth. Okay, so this is something which I want to tell. And as far as philosophy is concerned, many people equate, I mean, I'm talking about common man. Okay, so many people equate philosophy to metaphysics, right? In India, normally people equate philosophy to astrology, because when I was doing my bachelor's and master's, whenever I used to travel, when I meet someone and I introduce myself that I'm doing philosophy, then immediately they will show their hand. They say, why can't you predict? Okay, so these are some popular misconceptions. So philosophy has very many components. Some are very interesting and very useful for people who come from different walks of lives. One is logic. I strongly feel that logic should be made a compulsory subject for anyone and everyone who wants to get into any kind of administration or any kind of discussion, or I won't say debate, any kind of discussion. So logic is one, which is part of philosophy. Then we have something called epistemology, which is study of acquiring of knowledge, like how knowledge is acquired. So you can vaguely equate it to study of knowledge or systematic study of knowledge. So it's something to do with acquiring knowledge. So logic, then we have epistemology, then we have something called metaphysics, which talks about anything and everything which doesn't come within the purview of space and time. Whichever transcends space and time, if you're going to talk about it or if you're going to study about it, then it becomes metaphysics. Then we have something called ontology, which talks about the existence as such. Okay, so we are not going to get deep into it. Then we have something called aesthetics, which studies about beauty, right? How beauty is defined, right? And what is the true beauty, and all those things will come under that. Then we have axiology, right, which talks about value. So we have different branches or fields of study within philosophy. But by and large, the whole world, if you talk about any philosophy all over the world, they will have some contribution towards epistemology. They would have taken a stance towards epistemology. Unlike Indian schools of thoughts in the West, it is not a necessity that you must take a metaphysical position or you must take an ontological position or say axiological position to put forward your theory on epistemology. Okay, so with this backdrop, right, I just wanted to start this discussion. So I just want to share my perspective. I'm rather revisiting philosophy for almost 25 years later. So I completed my master's in 98. So after that, I didn't get a chance to do philosophy as such. So though I used to teach a subject called theory of knowledge, which is quite interesting. So maybe we can take it up during the discussion time, the last 10-15 minutes. Okay, so this is the backdrop. So whenever any philosopher or any school of thought started to take a position as far as the epistemology is concerned, what they did is they came out with their own approach or maybe the model, right? Or a structure, you can say, right? Or a theory, right? When it comes to acquiring knowledge. And they always try to use uh, some validation method to show what is true knowledge and what is false knowledge. So that is how they took a position when it comes to the concept of truth is concerned. So as far as the pre-Greek periods are concerned, so if you want me to do a little bit of chronological ordering, so we can start with the prehistoric period of or understanding of truth. Pre-Greek rather, sorry. Sorry for the mistake. So I stand corrected. So when we talk about the pre-Greek period, which is normally called as pre-Socratic period, right? So it is predominantly intellectual in nature. It is more practical or transactional in nature, whatever stance that they took, right? And when you talk about something like Heraclitus is a very important philosopher. You might have heard his quote, right? You can't take two dip in the same river, right? Something like that. It goes something like that. So he advocates something called doctrine of constant change. So for him, everything keeps changing every minute. So when he talks about truth, he didn't talk about something called absolute truth. So he spoke something about the undercurrent, right, which goes through all these changes. So if you're aware of it, if you become aware of what's happening, right, in the course of change, then he refers that to truth. Okay, so he doesn't have any kind of belief in something called absolute truth. So we have something called Parmenides, who existed something like 400 years before Common Era. He had a radically different view of truth. He argued that change and plurality were illusions, and that only a single unchanging reality exists. So this reality he referred to as the one or the being. So he believed in absolute truth. Then we had sophists, right, which is a group of teachers and philosophers who offered instructions in rhetoric. As I told you, in those days, rhetoric also came under philosophy. Till 1900, sociology, philosophy, and very many disciplines came under philosophy. Even law came under philosophy. Medicine came under philosophy. Okay, so these people, these sophists are known for teaching rhetoric, ethics, politics. So they often associated relativism um, between truth and morality. So this is something which I want you to keep in mind. So whenever somebody takes a stance on the concept of truth, right, they have some hidden agenda to push, right? So sometimes it's for pushing their idea of morality. It's something to do with their position on epistemology or something to do with metaphysics. So it's very interesting to see that. So normally when we do academic reading, um, we do studies in silos, which is not going to help, right? So if you are really committed to philosophy, if you want to learn something, I always suggest that you try to put it in the context, try to understand the historical milieu in which that particular ideology is sprung, and their position, right? The philosopher's position or stance in relation to so many other things, right? So sophists like Protagoras, they also had a very popular saying like man is a measure of all things. So for them, truth is subjective. So they suggested a position, or they took a position wherein for them it is always a subjective truth. You can't have anything to do with absolute truth. Okay, so this is something to do with the pre-Greek philosophers. So if you wanted to have a general comparison between Western philosophy and Indian philosophy, the concept of the concept of truth in Western philosophy is rooted more in the cultural and philosophical traditions, as I told you now. And as far as Indian schools of thoughts are concerned, as you know, there are two major classifications. Almost all the Indian schools are brought under the heads of either Astika schools or Nastika schools. It is little different from the popular understanding of this expression called Nastika or Astika. So generally, people assume that when somebody don't believe in God, right, he is called as Nastika, and person who believes in God, they are called as Astika. But in the philosophical, what do you call, discipline, anyone who doesn't believe in Vedas, right, they are called as Nastika, and people who believe in Vedas, they are called as Astika, right? So those popular Nastika schools are Jainism, Buddhism, and Charvaka. And the Astika schools, you might have heard about Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, Vedanta, and Yoga. So these are some popular Astika schools. So in classical Western philosophy, the concept of truth has been a central theme for philosophers from ancient Greek, as I told you. In fact, it was more in the ancient Greek philosophy, right? Slowly, it took different twists and turns, and till it reached Immanuel Kant, we couldn't see a major difference or major shift. Right. One more thing which I forgot is that in Western philosophy, we had two major schools of thought. One is called as rationalism. The other one is called as empiricism. So philosophers who believed in the validation of knowledge, justification of knowledge for experience, they come under empiricism or empiricist school of thought. So people who believed in logic for validation of knowledge, so they came under rationalism, who gave a lot of importance to reason or logic. So these were the two major schools of thought till Immanuel Kant. So when Kant came into existence, so he advocated something called subjective idealism, which is quite interesting. So I strongly suggest you to explore more about Immanuel Kant, who is a great philosopher. I did my research in a field called hermeneutics, which is also quite interesting, right? So it talks about how to unravel truth, which is hidden in the text. So that's a different topic altogether. Maybe time permits, we will discuss more about that. So when it comes to truth, as I told you, we have very many theories, out of which I'll be talking about a little bit about correspondence theory, coherence theory, pragmatic theory, and transactional theory we will touch upon a little bit. But these are the three major theories which are considered very important. And even now it is plugged into jurisprudence and so many other disciplines. So coming back to correspondence theory of truth, it is very, very commonsensical, which is easy to understand. So let's say if somebody is making a statement, a proposition that I see a white crane there, right? So if somebody is going to do a fact check, they go out and check the fact that whether there is a white crane out there. And if these two statements or these two facts and propositions correspond to each other, then that is considered as truth. It's quite commonsensical. So it had its own limitations. So everything can't be factually verified. If I say I love my mom very much, so it's a statement or a proposition which I'm making. So how to measure it, how to validate it, right? Factually, it's something which is very difficult, right? There are so many claims like that which can't be validated easily. So correspondence theory has its own limitation, though it's quite commonsensical and widely used. It has its own limitation. Then comes something called coherence theory of truth, which is quite interesting. So whenever somebody makes a proposition or a hypothesis or a statement, it should cohere to already established facts or already existing propositions. It should not contradict that, right? But it also has its own limitation. So I'll give you this analogy of geocentric theory. right? For a long, long, long time, people believe that Earth is the center and every other planet revolves around it, right? So when you make a statement which is something aligned to it, people will accept it because it meets the requirement of coherence theory. But eventually, it was disproved, and then heliocentric theory came into existence, right? So primarily, the advocates of coherence theory came from the science background because for them, right, so having coexisting theories which are contradictory in nature creates a lot of trouble because they wanted more certainty. So this theory is also in use, right, by majority of the scientific people, right? Then we have something called pragmatic theory of truth, which is simply amazing, right? Um, Obviously, it is propounded by American philosophers like William James and Charles Peirce. Right. So you can easily make out, as the name suggests, pragmatic is nothing but it comes from the word practice, which works. Right. Anything which works is true. Let's say I say this is a pen. Right. What is the purpose of pen? Is the purpose of pen is to write. Right. If till it writes, then this is a pen. It's a true statement. Right. The moment it stops writing, this is no more a pen. It's just a constituent, what do you call it? It consists of so many other parts, but you can't call it a pen. So this is a very simple, commonsensical, straightforward way of pragmatic theory of truth. So any practice, right, which might sound superficial or superstitious rather, if it works, then the pragmatic theory people or pragmatic school of thought will tell that's true. Just go ahead and believe. Okay, so the last one, right, which is quite interesting, is nothing but constructivist theory of truth. So according to this theory, there is nothing called truth out there. It's just a mental construct. So till we have a consensus, right, though the truth is subjective because it's my mental construct, if we can have a consensus among the community, then it is true. Okay, so this is quite interesting, though it might sound little weak, right? So there are a lot of great philosophers who support this, right? Even Buddhists, all the Buddhists support this particular theory of truth, constructivist theory of truth. So the question might come whether we should fall back on only one method or one framework to understand whether a particular proposition is true or not. It's left to us. So normally what people do is they club correspondence and coherence theory together and they try to use it, right? Sometimes people use only pragmatic theory of truth. So these are interesting theories of truth, which certainly we can explore and understand their limitations, where in which context we can approach it or apply it, right? And one more thing about constructivist theory of truth is that uh, people who propose a lot of theories of morality or ethical theories, right? They support this because if you think about morality, what is considered to be immoral in one particular society, right? Especially when it comes to personal practices and customs, right? It's very much accepted in a different custom, different practice, right? So it's a little difficult to say whether that is right or wrong. I don't want to get deep into any kind of religious practice here, but I believe you know, right? In different customs, people marry their own brother's daughter, right? Uncle's daughter, and things like that. So when it comes to morality, it's very difficult to have some kind of reference point based on which we can say what is right and what is wrong, or what is true and what is false practice and things like that. Um, One more interesting point which I wanted to state here is the Greek equivalent of the expression truth is aletheia. Aletheia literally means unfolding or revealing, revealing or revelation. It's a dynamic concept. The process of revealing and the revelation, right, constitute the expression aletheia. It's a Greek expression. It's quite interesting because the later philosopher Heidegger uses it quite often in all his books, Being and Time, and so many other texts, right? It's a very interesting concept, dynamic concept, right? So if you have some time, just reflect on it, right? So that it comes close to Vedanta and Buddhistic understanding as well. So this is a backdrop of the different theories of truth that we have. So if you want to talk a little bit about Plato and Aristotle, Plato believed in something called world of forms, and he believed in absolute truth. He believed, genuinely believed that that is real, and whatever exists here, it's nothing but a copy of it, a duplicate of it. And whatever we see here in this world, it's just an illusion. So he believed in something called world of ideas, and he also believed there is something called absolute truth which exists in the world of ideas. Okay, when it comes to Aristotle, he had a different perspective, he had a different view, right? He had a very practical what do you call a very commonsensical approach to truth. He goes he what do you call supports correspondence theory of truth. So if anybody is going to make any proposition, he would say if it corresponds with the fact, then it's true. Okay, so that's his position. So I think we have covered a major chunk of pre-Socratic philosophers, and then Plato and Aristotle now. Okay, then we will move to Enlightenment period. 1600 and later, that period is marked as Enlightenment period. So if you read a little bit of aesthetics, right, you can see that a lot of changes happen in the field of painting, art, right, in religion, in philosophy, in politics. A lot of things changed after 1600. So that's marked as Enlightenment period. Descartes is a very important philosopher of that particular time. So his famous saying, "Cogito ergo sum," I think therefore I am, is a very popular saying. I think you might have seen that in many ads even. So for him, doubting is the best way to reach the truth. Um, in a raw manner, you can compare it with 90-90, right? Though they are two different perspectives and used in two different contexts and for two different purposes. So Descartes' cogito ergo sum is a wonderful what do you call approach which existed then, right? Which led to nihilism, right? People believe that um, knowledge is not at all possible. That's exactly what Descartes was trying to communicate, but it's not like that. So it's a very interesting stance, right? Then we reach Immanuel Kant, right? Who talked about something called transcendental idealism, where he says it's very difficult to escape the limitations of our intellect. So he gives this metaphor of using space and time as spectacles. So without the spectacles, right, it's almost impossible to see this world and understand it if you have some kind of a visual challenge. So he uses this as a metaphor to say or to communicate that our intellect is conditioned by space and time. So anything that is given through this intellect will have a limitation. So it will be limited by space and time. So if you're talking about something, right, which is existing out there, it's going to be really difficult to say whether it exists exactly the way it is in our mind, right? To put it in very simple, commonsensical way, knowledge is acquired through the sensory stimuli. So what exactly happens when we construct knowledge is we collect a lot of sensory stimuli from different places, and the mind constructs, right, an image or a framework of knowledge within our mind based on whatever is given in our mind in an innate manner. So this is something which Kant is trying to expose, right? He's a tough philosopher to crack. So he has authored three major works. So I strongly suggest you to go through it if you're really interested in exploring further about what Immanuel Kant is trying to say. So one is Critique of Practical Judgment, Critique of Judgment, Critique of Judgment. So there are three books, Critique of Pure Reason and Critique of Judgment. So there are three books which Immanuel Kant has he has written. So I strongly suggest you to go and explore that, which is quite interesting. Okay. So it's almost 30 minutes. So we will come back to Indian philosophy now. As I told you, as far as Indian philosophy is concerned, Nyaya school is known for logic. So they are more concerned about validation through logic rather than exploring other methods to understand or to reach knowledge. So they normally use truth and validity interchangeably. So we can ignore that. And Mimamsa supports Nyaya's position. Right. So the major schools of thought that we can think of now is Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta in particular, and then we can talk about Jainism, Buddhism, right, which gives us a very interesting view. Unlike Western philosophy, it's not just for epistemological pursuit. They have their excuse. So they have their own theory of truth. In India, almost all the schools of thought, right? I think we can safely say that almost all the schools of thought had some kind of inclination towards metaphysics, right? In Advaita Vedanta, it is very clear. Though their philosophy is quite interesting. So when it comes to truth, they talk about three different levels. All of you might have heard about it. Vyavaharika Satta, Paramarthika Satta. Satta is nothing but the plane of when you are in deep sleep state, when somebody is going to stab you, and when you see the blood oozing out of you, right? You suddenly wake up, right? Because you had a nightmare, and you wake up shouting that somebody has stabbed me, save me, right? Something like that. Am I audible? Is the net connection stable?
The net connection is not stable. That's what I was about
Hello.
wondering what to say. It's
Am I
pixelating,
audible?
and a few
Is it
sentences went away.
show a thumbs up if my connectivity is good?
What do I show?
Okay,
Reactions.
can I just I'll just stop the video.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think now it will be fine.
Yes, I did that in another class. Yes, true.
Okay. Yeah. So so as far as Shankaracharya is concerned, so he for him the only thing that's real is Brahma with capital B, right? Everything is unreal. So as I told you in the beginning, when we talk about reality, we are talking about something which doesn't have an origin in time and in time, and which doesn't go through any kind of change. So this is the definition. So when you realize that, the moment of realization, right, he equates that to truth. Okay, so this is a very interesting concept that we have in Indian philosophy, especially in Vedanta. Okay, so this is something which you can keep in mind. And whenever we talk about truth, we talk always in connection with the concept of dharma. Okay, which is quite interesting. Which is quite interesting. So whenever you explore truths in Jainism or Buddhism or any Indian school of thought, right? So in Hindu philosophy, it always goes hand in hand, right? Truth and dharma goes hand in hand. So it's quite interesting to see, right, how it is being used in Indian philosophy. Okay, so when you come back to Astika schools, right? As I told you, yeah, I forgot about Samkhya. Sankhya and yoga, they go hand in hand. So Samkhya, yoga, both of them follow Vedantic position when it comes to the concept of truth. Okay, so this is how it works. Um, okay, so we will first touch a little bit about Anekantavada and then come back to Advaita Vedanta. As far as Jainism is concerned, it believes in two things. So they believe that there is something called absolute truth, which you can realize only internally. You can realize through any other external source. So this is their stance. So as far as this level of existence, as far as our normal reality is concerned, they believe you can have only partial truth. Right. So this is quite interesting. There is a Western philosopher who talks about something called verisimilitude. Right. So he never talks about truth. He talks about something called verisimilitude, which comes very close to truth, which is a wonderful expression. I always used to like that expression. Right. So Anekankavada is something like that. So the classic example, the classic metaphor that they use is about 5 or 6 blind people trying to understand how elephant looks. Right. So one person holds the tail of the elephant, one person holds the leg of the elephant, one person holds the tusk of the elephant, one person holds the ear of the elephant. Right. And all these people come together and try to explain how an elephant looks. So whatever explanation, whatever picture that they have about elephant and whatever definition that they're going to give about elephant is going to be partial. It can't be complete because they haven't comprehended elephant in its entirety. Okay, so this is a very good example that Jainism gives when they talk about Anekankavada. So technically, or this is the nomenclature that they have given to their multiplicity viewpoint of truth theory. Okay, Anekankavada. So which is quite interesting, which solves majority of our problems. Right? So people won't fight and kill each other in the name of cult, right? If they believe in Anekankavada. And as far as Buddhism is concerned, they have something called anicca, right? They believe in the concept of anicca or impermanence. Shanikavada, you might have heard about Shanikavada, right? They believe only this second is real, right? So that's the concept that they believe in, right? So they don't believe in something called truth which exists in this world. So they also advocate realization of truth within, right, from within. So internally, you will have to practice and you will have to go through all those noble paths that they suggest and then realize the truth from within. So that is the concept of Buddhism. So when they talk about ultimate truth, they use this expression shunyata. There are a lot of debating that happens among the philosophers what exactly the sunyata means, right? Whether it is emptiness or emptiness of XYZ, right? So that's something which we don't want to get involved now, right? So for the sake of academic pursuit, we can understand that Buddhism also believes in something called absolute truth, but that's something which should be realized internally by the individuals. That there is no other way out, right? Some other person can't teach or infuse truth into somebody else. So that is the position of Buddhist school of thought. Um, there is something called two truth approach, which is similar, somewhat similar to Advaita Vedanta, which is advocated by Madhyamika school of Mahayana Buddhism. Right. So whatever we have discussed now, right? Similar, which is there in Buddhism, right? They talk about something called Samvriti Satya, which is the conventional truth, right? Which exists in this particular world for all practical purpose. We can accept those relative truth, right? And there is something called ultimate truth, which is something called as Paramartha Satya. That Paramartha Satya ought to be realized internally, as I told you. So in principle, they accept something called two theory, which is something like conventional truth and the ultimate truth, which is Samvriti Satya and Paramartha Satya, right, propounded by Buddhism. We have covered Buddhism, we have covered Jainism. Okay. There is an expression which they use, which is called as Parokshanyana and Aparokshanyana, which is there in Advaita as well. The key concept of Aparokshanyana is direct, immediate knowledge of ultimate reality or Brahman, right? Which Advaita Vedanta also propounds. So, if you want to see some commonality when it comes to realization of truth, right? All these three schools, right, believes or accepts that the ultimate realization of truth or realization of ultimate truth ought to happen internally from within, right? Though external factors can work as stimuli, right? But still, we are to realize it internally. So they call this jnana as aparoksha jnana. It's not a paroksha jnana, it is aparoksha jnana. So it is not mediated. Okay, so here we haven't discussed much about Maya, we haven't discussed much about Brahman, right? I believe all of you have a fair understanding of all these things, right? So we will straight away, we'll have to straight away move into the conclusion now. So as I have discussed, right. So all the foundations of theories are either dependent on their metaphysical stance that they have taken, or the epistemological stance that they have taken, or the ethical stance that they have taken. If it is not for all these, at least there will be some kind of clinging or some kind of leaning towards the spiritual or religious stance that the school has taken. So just to mention about one paradox, which is called as liar's paradox, which normally we discuss in the Western logic, is that see, when you make a statement, right, it is possible to make a statement which is paradoxical in nature, right, which is something like I'm telling you a lie, right. If that is true, then the statement that I'm making, that I'm telling a lie, can't be true, right? So it is inherently paradoxical. Okay, so there are a lot of paradoxical statements which you can make when you are going to equate truth only to validity, because this is a logical paradox which I'm talking about, right? Which is popularly called as liar's paradox in the West. So for Westerners, at least after Socratic period, right? Before Socratic period, as you know, when it comes to cosmology, they believed in those five basic elements and creation happening out of those five elements, right? And even here in Indian philosophy, we have something called Panchikarana, right? Wherein we believe that the whole world came into existence based on these Panchabhutas, right? And you know that, right? Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas formed based on that. And even now, even today, Ayurveda is based on that philosophy, right? That understanding. So there were a lot of commonalities between Indian philosophy and early Greek philosophy, but somehow on the way, Westerners forgot about all these things and they started depending too much on sense perception. Okay, so coming back to my TOK experience, theory of knowledge experience. So I strongly suggest you to go and explore the framework that is there in IB diploma program, which is normally taught for grade 11 and 12 students. The framework is wonderful. So what they have done is they try to create a framework, right, using which we can try and evaluate ourselves and the process of gaining knowledge. So they have something called ways of knowing, right, which is made up of something like sense perception, reasoning, imagination, intuition, right? And you can add two or three more things to it, right? Then in the next layer, you have something called areas of knowledge, right? We have different areas of knowledge. We have natural sciences, human sciences, we have arts, and so many other things, ethics, and things like that. So at a different point in time, we try to stress, or we try to overstress rather, one particular way of knowing over the other ways of knowing, right? That actually creates trouble because of the sociological influence, because of the religious influences, because of the psychological influences, even sometimes because of the economic influences, right? What happens is we try to keep one way of knowing the higher pedestal, right? Normally it is sense perception. We always think that sense perception is more certain compared to intuition, right? If I say to someone, right, please don't go out today, right, it may not really help you, right? You might meet with an accident, something is telling me, my gut feeling is telling that this is going to happen, right? Normally, because of the influence that we have over a period of time, In philosophy, we have something called Weltanschauung, the worldview, right? Our worldview is camouflaged or influenced greatly by whatever experience or value systems that we have acquired over a period of time. That is going to influence which way of knowing that we are going to pick to validate a particular claim, right, a truth claim, and decide whether that is going to be true or not, right? Many times when I have discussions with people, right, who have certain belief systems, right, when it comes to their belief systems, they're ready to blindfoldly accept many of those practices, right, and they do it at home. When it comes to those belief systems and practices that come from other religious background or other cultural background, they readily reject it, or they try to what do you call, put their scientific glass, right, scientific goggles, and try to deny that. Okay, so I think I've given a fair view of what different philosophers at different point in time told about their understanding of truth or their perspective of truth. Now I think I can open it up for discussion, right? Is that fine?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. The last point that you said about uh,
Ways of knowing.
them having the double standards.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because
Mm-hmm.
today, especially in India, and with all the modernization and with the cultural exchanges, with the influence of media, with the influence of OTT platforms and series like in Netflix, etc. Amazon, if you see all those series, Amazon Prime, all those series that we see,
Correct.
Western series, it's very, very clear, obvious that you said. And can you give a couple of examples that how, based on how it impacts our life here?
Yeah, sure. I'll share my own
And
experience.
yeah, because this is very relevant for our current time, how it affects us subliminally.
Correct.
Right.
So I'll share my own experience. I when I was working in a school in Bengaluru, which is a very popular school, and I had a very good friend. He's a physics teacher, and I used to discuss a lot of physics concepts with him. I believe Yogeshvar will also know that I have a special interest in quantum physics. So I used to talk a lot with him. I used to discuss Frijov Capra and so many other interesting books, Berelman, and so many other books that I used to read on physics in general and quantum physics in particular. So we are good friends. Once I was having food with him, and I told that um, one of my relatives, he is performing some XY ritual wherein the baby will be bathed with water, sacred water, and then all those rituals will happen. Right. And then he told how with one bathing, the kid will become pure. Then immediately the next moment I told, when you christen your kids, right, in the church, right, when your father is going to dip the kid in the ball of water and then take the baby out and say now he or she is purified, right? You believe that, right? So you have that belief system, and when it comes to your religion and your practice, your custom, you don't question that, correct? But when it comes to somebody else practice, right? When it comes to somebody's religious practice or customary practice, you question it, which is wrong, right? So if you're going to take a neutral stance and say that I'm going to subject everything, right, any customary practice to scientific scrutiny or something like that, then you take that stance and do it, then people will come and disprove you, right, that you are wrong and they are right. Now scientifically we can prove that water has memory, right, and using water you can cleanse people, right? That is also proved now scientifically. So if you want to do it scientifically, we can do, but my point is you don't need to do this for anything and everything which comes within the purview of metaphysics, which comes within the purview of belief systems. Right. Till it is not going to harm anyone, right? There is no need to prove that this is good for XYZ. and especially if it is going to be done privately, and no established authority should have any kind of say on it. I felt very bad when this verdict was pronounced about this Ayyappa temple recently, right? Because that's a customary practice which is going on for a long time. When we are not interfering in the religious practices of other religious communities, so how come court can interfere in something which is being believed for a long time? So this is something which, these are two examples which I can give.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I will. I have the privilege of living 3 kilometers away, so I can always come and discuss with you. So I will leave the platform for others to ask questions.
Sure. Please.
Yeah.
Please feel free to ask anything. There is nothing called a silly question at all. So whatever comes to your mind, you can ask. If you want to say that whatever I told is wrong, please go ahead and do it. Right. That is how discussions happen in Indian tradition. So we haven't spared even Lord Krishna. So you don't need to spare me.
Right. So just one small rejoinder for everyone. He had just given a very broad outlook. So just to have a feeler of some points in Western and India. Just an idea, because usually when it comes to spiritual exploration, we don't go for any kind of study of philosophy. Study of philosophy is always considered as academic.
Exactly.
But if you think from the perspective of the philosophers themselves, it was a quest for truth. As much it was a holy quest, as much as it is a quest for us. As much as it is a quest for truth for a yogi or a Vedantin. It was the same for a Greek philosopher. It was a quest for truth. And I think as seekers of deeper reality, and there is an intrinsic value in us to understand the reality that we live, that the basis and the meaningfulness in the life, to arrive at it, there is an intrinsic value for that in us. And that is exactly why we are not satisfied until we know something properly. At least there is a point where we think, okay, now I have understood that. Then there is a peace of mind. But suddenly that understanding is challenged by a new input. The intellectual restlessness begins again. Our quest continues. Oh my God, then we are restless until we come to again a conclusion. So whether we understand or not, we have a need to feel that we have understood. So as long as the understanding is not challenged, we are comfortable with what we have understood. But the moment the understanding is challenged, the quest for a better understanding goes. So this is a very intrinsic need in us, and I think it is the common thread between the spiritual philosophical traditions of India and also the ancient Western philosophical schools. That the fundamental urge, it's a fundamental need that I have to understand and arrive at. I have to understand the world around me and within me. The moment one is a conscious person, I think it becomes like a very fundamental need for a philosophically oriented person. So we don't have to consider that as academic. It is as much as the quest for truth as as the religious schools are there. Just because it has gotten a religious dimension, it doesn't make this more spiritual than the other. That's what I was thinking. So what would you say on that? Is it okay to say that?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So this is exactly why I brought in this discussion. I brought in Parameshwaran. The reason for choosing Mr. Parameshwaran is that he doesn't stop with simple academic exploration. So he tries to see the truth of whatever he has studied in his real life, and he is a constant explorer in his own personal life, as I know him personally. So I thought that will bring in a more authentic value to our quest here, rather than a simple academic discussion. There are enough PhDs in philosophy whom we can always ask to come and give a guest lecture. And we have enough lectures in YouTube. But that was not the point. The point is to see how we can integrate it in our personal quest. So somebody who is already doing that and who has an exposure of comparative philosophy, I thought we can throw more light on it. So based on how what kind of interest you all show. We can involve Mr. Parameshwaran more in the coming sessions. So we have another 5 to 10 minutes. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand, and Ms. Swati will unmute you.
Vanakkam, already unmuted though. I mean, it's optional. Hello.
Yeah, you're audible, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Vanakkam, Kannan.
Vanakkam.
Kannan.
Okay.
Thank you for the lecture. The question, I have one question. In your lecture, you mentioned about basically our philosophy, or like the truth is anadi, and then it is also in our Hindu dharma. In how to say, it's not religion. Anyway, in our India, it's it's basically connected with dharma in hand to hand.
Exactly.
So let's say Eastern or Indian philosophy is connected with the dharma all the time, morality,
Correct.
Values. So one question is, then what is the Western philosophy? Only truth about truth. You mentioned in for reason. Here it's connected with dharma all the time, or hand to hand. But then what is for Western philosophy? That's first one question. I would stop there, please. Help me on that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for that question. See, even when it comes to Western world, they have associated truth to a lot of ethical philosophies. Okay, it is not that only in India we have done that, but this concept of dharma in India is quite exhaustive, I should say. Right, one can talk for weeks together on this concept of dharma. Okay. When we talk about dharma, it has something to do with the swabhava. Based on swabhava, you'll have to choose the swadharma, and so it goes on and on and on. Okay. As far as Western schools are concerned, it is not necessary that every time they are supposed to connect truth to their ethical stance. Sometimes it is for the epistemological pursuit, right? Sometimes it is for metaphysical pursuit. Sometimes it's for ontological pursuit. See, I'll give you an example of Heidegger, right? Because he is my favorite philosopher. Husserl and Heidegger, these two German philosophers are quite close to my heart. They are really good philosophers. You can enjoy, right, when you read those works of Heidegger. See, for Heidegger, he talks about something called Dasein, right, wherein he talks about you being connected to this world, and at the time of connection, right, whatever happens to your consciousness, right, that leads you to an elevated consciousness. So, which is more, his philosophy is close to Buddhism. Okay. So when he talks about truth, right, he always connects it to a dynamic concept of truth. It is not a static concept of truth, wherein he is not talking about a Cartesian dichotomy of a knower and the known. Right. In the case of Descartes, right, he talks about knower and the known and the knowledge process or the knowing process. Okay. So it's more static in nature. But when we talk about philosophers like Husserl or Heidegger, or even if you try to apply to the literature, right? When you talk about Jacques Derrida, right? People who come from literature background, they might have read Jacques Derrida or Jean-Paul Sartre, right? They talk about meaning unraveling itself, right, during every reading. It is not that we search for the meaning which the author is has embedded in that particular text. So it's a very different concept. So the concept of meaning here, or the concept of truth in relation to or in the context of Heideggerian philosophy, is more dynamic in nature. I don't know whether I'm able to communicate it correctly to you, right? Which is a very, very interesting concept, right? Which comes very close to the understanding of truth, which Buddhism talks, right? Which early Greek philosophers talk, right? Heraclitus.
He's talking about dharma, the importance of dharma in their quest for truth. Can I say that, Kanan?
Yes. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
So,
Very good.
like for
Right.
example, in Vipassana, one second. For example, in Vipassana, they have Shila. Shila, Samadhi, Prajna. So we have the Shila.
Correct.
So similarly, probably he's asking an equivalent there, like you said about ethics.
No, no, no. So their truth is not pursued as a value or a virtue. Here it is pursued.
Okay.
So in early Greek philosophers, you can see some traces of it. But unfortunately, after that, after Socrates, you can't see that much, except in Immanuel Kant. Right. So unfortunately, truth is not pursued as a virtue. Truth is pursued as an epistemological pursuit, knowledge for knowledge's sake. Right. It's more towards that rather than towards the ethical aspect of
Alright.
seeking knowledge or truth.
Okay. And I have another question on the same. So similarly, in that case, when it comes to let's say here, in terms of real life practice or daily life practice, like food, let's say here, if it is like a dharma based food, I mean, as much as possible, like sattvic, or it is also in Ayurveda or naturopathy or yoga food. So is it similar anything? I mean, it's maybe as you said, there's no wrong question, so I'm just like putting the question out.
Yeah, please go
Which
ahead.
is of so is that anything related with the food in terms of Western philosophies? You had mentioned like many different kinds of excuse me, the truth based on correspondence or coherence and pragmatic theory. So in that,
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately,
okay.
no. Yeah, I get your point. But what happened is, see, as I told you, till 16th century, religion was not separated fully from the administration. So you didn't have too much of choice. You didn't have a choice to choose your food. Whatever the country decides based on the religious philosophy, you have no other option but to eat that, or people will kill you. Right. After 16th century, yeah, after 16th, see, unlike India, in India, you always had that freedom, at least to my understanding. Maybe I may be wrong, you can correct me. But to my understanding, that particular freedom was there for a long time. Right. So in the West, it was not like that. Till 16th century, there is no question of free will when it comes to choice of food. So whether you like it or not, if you are a true X or true Y, right, whichever religion that you follow, you have no other option but to take those foods which are sanctioned for you to eat, right? Which are sanctioned not to eat, obviously it's a no, strict no. So legal impositions will be there. So obviously people will not have the choice of freedom for it.
Understood.
So that is a major difference, yeah.
All right. So continuing that one question, I'm sorry to take the time.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
In the, maybe I'm wrong too, the gladiators, like recently there were some things which were studying archaeological, is like gladiators found to be using the plant-based food, even though they are the strongest ones. I'm asking in the level of medicinal. I'm not talking in the vegan thing, but I'm talking the medicinal, like healing process. So it was not like it was there, but not really like compulsory on based on morality, but based on maybe medicine. It was. Is that right? My understanding on that?
Yeah, you are right. So in that case, see, the truth that we are talking about is a relative truth, right?
Yes.
That has a context here. So we are talking about truth within the context of medical philosophy here.
Correct.
Right. So if you're talking about Siddha or Ayurveda, whatever it is, Unani, there is a philosophical basis to it, right? Which says that Vada, Pitta, and Kapha should be in this particular proposition, right? It should maintain the equilibrium, right? So when you take a particular food in excess during a particular time, during a particular place, during a particular season, obviously it is going to increase the Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which is going to disturb the equilibrium. Right. So for this, what I would suggest is whether that particular claim, the truth claim, is true or not, ought to be justified. So now the question comes, which particular way of knowing that we are going to pick to justify that? Is it just a sense perception that we are going to use, or we are going to use logic, collect a lot of evidence, data analysis, whatever theory formation, hypothesis formation, law making, theory making, whatever the process, that scientific process that we are going to use?
Correct.
Whether we are going to use that, or it is going to be simply based on belief, or it's going to be based on intuition, right? So these things are going to play a very vital role. If you say that it is my belief that whatever my Ayurvedic physician says is good for me, and if I'm going to feel good, right, it is working for me, then for me it is true. So if you take the stance of a pragmatic theory, but
Right.
if you're talking about establishing it as a common truth, right, when you want the society to accept, your community to accept, you have no other option but to go with correspondence and coherence theory of truth.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
So it's
All right.
as
Thank you so
simple
much.
as that. So
I just
yeah.
liked. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
And-
otherwise it is they have to go with the religious imposition, like kosher, for example.
Okay.
Exactly.
So again, it comes to Shastra Pramana, their own Shastra. Shastra, there is a verse in Bhagavad Gita which says, as far as things are concerned about what is to be done and what is not to be done, Shastra is the Pramana for you.
Right.
Tasmat Shastrameva Pramanam te karya akare vyavastha. It comes in Bhagavad Gita. It's a wonderful analysis that you said, because what are they going to choose? Where is the Pramana for the choice of the right food?
Right.
Basically, that's what you're saying. You explain now. So they don't have a Pramana, like how we say Shastra Pramana,
Right.
regarding to be done or not to be done. I think Paramesh's thing is frozen.
I can't see him actually.
Yeah,
Yes.
his net is frozen. Okay.
Well,
Let's
thank
see.
you.
He'll come back.
Yeah.
He'll come back. Let's wait for him to reconnect, and then we will continue.
Of course. I'm done with the question. Others can propose
Right.
the questions.
Yes. One more last question, and then we close.
I think I am connected now.
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had some
thank you.
internet issue.
No problem. Actually, the answer was done. So thank you, Roman and Ri.
Okay.
Others can take the question.
Yeah.
May I ask one?
For example,
Sure, please.
For example, I came across Pranav. One second. For example, I came across some statements like by Leonardo da Vinci, for example. So he that he was a big advocate of vegetarianism and not eating meat.
Correct.
There are a few others also. But it was more from a point of view of about ethics. There was more of an ethical motivation. Was there like he said, was there a motivation for not eating meat or any specific diet regulation based on understanding of the body or understanding of how food affects the mind? Was any philosopher talked about it in the West? Because we have a huge understanding of that, and we emphasize ahara, vichara, vyavahara. So I don't know if did you come across anything like that?
No, unfortunately, it is not codified or it's not visible in any scriptures as such. But when you talk about Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci, he was part of Priory of Zion, right? So all secret societies, right? All secret societies, they practice vegetarianism. It's quite surprising. But unfortunately, we don't have any kind of scriptural evidence to support that because of their realization about the harm that killing and eating animals can bring in, right? Even our Pida, right, Siddha, our
Right.
Siddha Vidya, his guru, he strongly objects to it, and Vallalar objects to it, though they oppose many rituals and many shastras, but when it comes to vegetarianism, all of them, right, supported vegetarianism. It's quite surprising to see
But
such a commonality.
But as a philosopher, a philosophical system, other than ethical, probably there was no mention about this. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So all that we see in literature is something to do with the ethical stance. Right. Unfortunately, they don't talk about the influence of consumption of meat on mind and body.
Okay.
At least in the West. In Indian literature, yes, we see a lot, but
I think in our Indian approach to the quest for truth, taking all aspects of life as an integrated whole in one's pursuit,
in West,
that seems to be very unique only to us.
see.
Sorry? You don't hear me? His net is gone. Okay, I think I will wind up. It's getting late.
All right.
Right. We will wind up. We'll see if he is able to connect again and then. Okay. We'll wait for a minute. So anybody else has any question?
Yes, I have, but I can ask next week if we're over time now. I do have a question, but I can ask next week.
Can you just state your question and we finish with that?
Yes. I was going to ask him how to think about in the Indian tradition, we talk about the absolute truth, which with capital T touched upon, and then in our modern world, we talk about the lowercase truth with T and lowercase t and more relative truth. So I think similar to what I'd asked in our last class at the end, how can we understand how those two connect with each other, or do they have a connection with each other?
Right. Right. I told you to ask this to the Western philosopher teacher. Correct.
Yes.
Good. So probably we will have another session with Mr. Parameshwaran and we will continue with that. We will start with this question. Maybe I can forward the question to him and he will come ready for that.
Sure, definitely.
Right.
Thank you.
So I guess I'll see. I will contact him separately and see whether he's going to come back or not. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just give me a second. Yes.
Sorry, I'm having some. Yeah.
Are you back?
Some issues. Sorry.
Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
All right. I will also cut my video. The question is, Pranav put a question. So we will finish the session with the question, and probably you can take that, continue on that in our next session with you. If you cannot answer it in 2-3 minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
Pranav, your question, please.
Yes, yes. And thank you, Parameshwarji, and thank you, Yogeshwarji, for inviting him. But Parameshwarji, my question is, how can we think about the relationship, or is there any relationship between what you mentioned at the beginning, which is the absolute truth that the Indian traditions seek to find, absolute truth with a T, that is, timeless, contextless,
Hello.
outside of, hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, there was some disturbance. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Please go ahead. Yeah, I'm
Yes,
able to
so-
hear you.
Okay, great.
Hello.
So I was just asking, how do we think about the relationship between the absolute truth that the Indian traditions seek to discover or find, the absolute truth with the T? What is the connection of that to what you may call the more relative truth that Western philosophers or Western science seeks to find, like biology or the age of the universe or things like that? So what is the relationship between those two, and are there any thoughts on how the absolute truth manifests into this relative truth?
He put in a much better way when he told before. He said the
Ah,
truth, the
well,
big T,
so
and the
I
truth,
would
small
like to,
t.
I
Is there
got your
any
point.
relationship between them at all? And if so,
Hello.
what?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are. With a little cracking, but yes, you are audible. Now you are not audible.
Hello.
Yes, now you are audible.
Sorry, your voice is breaking. I got the point. Am I audible? Am I audible now?
Yes. Yes. Now, yes. Can you talk?
Hello.
Yes, now it's coming, but breaking. So, okay, maybe we will continue this in the next class. It's got late, very late now. The issue is
Hello.
persisting. All right. So it is
Yeah, I
real.
got back.
Every time.
Yeah, now the now the connectivity is better.
Yes.
This is the truth of reality, right? So partially it is true that net connection is there, but partially it is not true. Okay. Yeah. So okay, I'll try to give I'll try to use this metaphor, right, which I liked a lot. Right. So relative truth is like a thorn. Okay. When somebody is stuck with a thorn in the foot, right? So we use a thorn to take that out. Correct. But after that, obviously, we will not retain the thorn. Correct. So this is the metaphor which is given by all the Advaitins. Right. So I think that makes a wonderful metaphor to understand. While being in this world, while leading a normal life in the Vyavaharika Satta, still you can try and transcend it through a lot of sadhanas, right? So it is only through internal realization we will be able to get into that state. It is like moving from a swapna state to the normal wakeful state, right? So others can shook you, right? Others can create sound near you, or maybe they can provide some stimulus so that you can wake up from the sleepful state, right? So it is like that. So from Vyavaharika state to Paramarthika state, we will have to go. We will have to go to that level or that state of existence to realize the absolute truth. So that is what we call as what do you call enlightenment, right, in English. So in India, we always associate the truth with this metaphysical or soteriological
search or pursuit. But in the West, as I told you, it's more for epistemological reasons. So just for the sake of gaining knowledge in this world, right, they seek the truth. Truth with the capital, the small t, right, which is relative to this particular world, right, wherein the reality is with small r, which keeps changing. Okay. Hello.
Yes,
Karthik, am I
yes.
audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great.
He was
I believe
asking.
I got the question correctly and responded. Can you repeat it because it was breaking?
I think he was asking in a more in an epistemological sense. Is there a relationship between the absolute truth and the transactional, the big T and the small t? If there is a relationship between the big T and the small t, what is it? I think that was his question more. That was sounding more like a Western philosophy question, and I told him to ask you when you come. Is it right, Pranav?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think even Western philosophy doesn't.
Right. So, Mr. Parameshwaran, now it is late today, so we will wind up.
Okay.
Maybe your next session can begin with a serious philosophical analysis of this question, and then from there maybe you can tell what other philosophers have said.
Yeah, sure.
That can be. I think it can be an interesting beginning for an entire session, actually.
Yeah.
Right. So I will wind up the session. Let us with thanks for Mr. Parameshwaran for coming here, sharing his one valuable time with us.
Correct.
And we will hope to have more sessions, and probably he can join us next week or even in. We'll plan that. We'll see that, and we'll continue on that. And let us conclude the session with our Purnamada Shanti Mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaja Purnamevavashyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Thank you. We will meet next week.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your
Nandri. Thank you so
time.
much.
I hope it was useful. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yes, it was. Thank you very much.
Thank you.